Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my weekly webcast. It is show number 273. According to my count, it's the 8th of October, it's a Sunday, and it's a lovely sunny day here in the southeast of England, and it's supposed to be quite a warm one. So if you're out and about on the bike, I won't be surprised, but I hope you catch up later in the when you get back. So what have we got for you today in today's show? Proposed Blackwall Tunnel toll is under fire. Again, probably not of any great interest to you if you're out of London, but what happens in London often heads out to the Shires in the not too distant future. Motorcycle damage from pothole impacts is on the rise. So who's responsible? Well, not Northumberland Council, if you believe what they have to say. Marquez appears to be quitting Honda. The long-term Honda rider appears to have ended his contract a year early. We'll have a look at that story. The Kawasaki hybrid. I know I've been banging on about this, but I really am quite excited by the idea of a hybrid motorcycle. It's due to arrive in spring next year, not autumn, so I was 6 months out with that. Meanwhile, the tunnel trike from White Motorcycle Concepts, WMC, there's a limited number going on sale to the public. And Suzuki have, rather surprisingly, announced a cheaper road-oriented DL800 V-Strom. More on that bike in the show. And then finally, today at the end, I'll have a look at the IAM Roadsmart response to the Welsh Urban 20 limit and ask a few questions about their thinking on that. So that's what's in today's show. Remember, if you've got a question, any comments, do drop me a line. I'm always interested to hear what people have to say. I'll answer live if I can. If not, I'll get back to you at the end of the show. And a good morning to our viewers, including Clive, who's said hello this morning. Right, so what have we got for you then? Well, first thing I just want to say is that I'm quite pleased. It's been a lot of hard work actually, but I've actually finally got round to finishing the backlog of posts on my coffee site. Now, if you haven't been over there, and I suspect a lot of you will have been by now, it's a Facebook archive, and what I've done is I've taken all the skills on Saturday and tips on Tuesday posts, which go back for a decade, unbelievably. It only seems like yesterday I switched to Facebook and started writing on here. So there are 100 articles, roughly speaking, from each year, as there are 52 weeks in a year, and everything from 2014 to 2022 is now uploaded, and of course the 2023 is still a work in progress, but that will make 1,000 articles by the end of the year. Some people have asked how I manage it. Sometimes I wonder myself actually, but anyway, that's all over there. There's plenty of free stuff, but if you want to access the entire archive, you can do it for a month. If you become a supporter, a £3 one-off payment will get you access to the whole thing for 1 month, and if you want to become a subscriber with a regular payment, you'll get access to all those posts and more besides. So that's all over on my coffee page, which is www.ko-fi.com. Survival skills. For some reason I forgot to put that into the comments, which is what I meant to put up. Anyway, let's move on and start talking about the news today. What have I got for you in the news? Well, the first item, as I said, is that there is a proposal to turn the Blackwall Tunnel into a toll road. Now, and not surprisingly, it's come under fire. Now, the charges are said to be due to come into force when the new Silvertown Tunnel is completed in 2025, and there are draft road signs already to be found, which suggests that both the tunnels would operate, the toll would operate on the tunnel from 6 AM to 10 PM, and it would cost a fairly again, it doesn't sound like it sounds like a fairly trivial amount, but it adds up. £3 for motorcyclists for a single trip, £4 for cars, £8.50 for other vehicles. Now, predictably, of course, with the current political climate, it's being called another attack on drivers. And the tunnel is it's 125 years old, actually, astonishingly enough. It's actually one of the few crossings between East London and South East London, and it carries an estimated 100,000 vehicles a day, so it will affect quite a lot of drivers and riders, of course. Now, moving on, potholes. Now, I suspect they're an issue that most of us will be familiar with, bouncing in and out of a pothole and hopefully coming out of it in one piece. Now, the trouble is that alloy motorcycle wheels are particularly vulnerable to damage. That's one good reason of having steel wheels on a car in the current climate. I flatted both wheels years ago on my CX500, so you can work out how long ago that was. Though I have to admit that was a brick in the road rather than a pothole. But road defects have dinged both my rear wheel on my XJ6 and the spare that I keep for it. Now, the first I hit in the dark, I never even saw it, so much for people who say keep your eyes open and you'll see them. No, you don't always. The other perhaps I should have avoided, but I failed to. It was so huge, stretching over such a big chunk of the road, I decided that swerving to avoid it was probably the worst idea, because I reckon I probably still hit it, but leaned over, so I went straight in and straight out the other side. Now, who is responsible for the damage? Well, Northampton County Council say it will not pay for any damage to a motorcyclist who wrote off both wheels on what was described as an enormous pothole whilst riding his bike in the county, because they say they had complied with statutory duties and inspected the road before the incident occurred. Now, father and son Dennis and Billy Hogg, they were out on the B6353, I don't know that road, on August the 6th when Billy hit the pothole. Now, the impact was said to have caused the bike to leap into the air, but he fortunately retained control, but both wheels of the bike were damaged, and it's a limited edition Boxer Cup BMW. So the cost of fixing the bike, presumably getting 2 new wheels and checking over the rest of it, was almost £2,000. Now, not surprisingly, the pair think the council should pay, and I'm sure a lot of us would also think that if they don't repair the road, then they should cough up. But Northampton County Council, they say that they will not repair the damage because they complied with their statutory duties, and what they had done, they say, is they had inspected the road and identified defects for repair in line with national codes of practice. And they say that the road was inspected on July the 13th, so something around a month earlier, and they say that all defects present on this stretch of road at the time of the pre-accident inspection were identified and repaired before the incident involving this bike. This pothole had not been reported to the council between its last inspection and the damage caused the bike, and they say that absolves them of responsibility because they didn't know that there was a defect on the road. Now, who's right? The AA actually say, they have a page about pothole advice. They say that local highways cannot be held responsible for potholes they don't know about. But they say if the pothole had been reported between the date of the inspection and the incident, then the rider may have a claim. So it may be worth going around and knocking on a few doors and seeing if any locals had actually reported it. I don't know. It's a tough tricky one for the rider, but certainly I think worth pursuing. Right, okay, MotoGP. Now, it frequently seems like a game of musical chairs at this time of the year as riders swap teams. Now, sometimes it's of course a high-performing new rider getting a promotion up into the class. Sometimes there are retirements, and then there are the swaps between teams, which frequently coincide with highs and lows of a rider's career. And naturally, the pinnacle of achievement is to get to ride on one of the factory first team bikes. And it's on one of these Premier seats that Marquez has been perched for his entire career at the top level. Now, having come into MotoGP in 2013, he got a ride straight away with the Repsol Honda team. So it's pretty big news that Marquez has apparently decided to leave Repsol Honda following the conclusion of this current 2023 MotoGP season, despite having 1 year left on his contract. Now, the statement from Honda Racing said, Honda Racing Corporation and Marc Marquez have mutually elected to terminate their 4-year contract prematurely at the end of the 2023 MotoGP World Championship season. Now, the split followed his test of the 2024 bike. Apparently he wasn't very impressed with it, and as I say, it's mutually agreed and said to be, quote, in the best interests to each pursue other avenues in the future to best achieve their respective goals and targets. Now, Marquez has frankly had an astonishing time in MotoGP. He won the 2010 125 World Championships, then the 2012 Moto2 World Championship, though neither without some controversy, as he had a number of collisions on track which resulted in other riders, including hot competitors, falling. Now, having switched to the in 2013 to the Premier class, he also went on to win that at the first attempt, and he was the first rookie to do that since Kenny Roberts in 1978. And he went on to dominate that decade with 5 more championships. He only missed out in 2015. But since his final 2019 championship, the seemingly invincible Marquez has struggled, to be frank. He broke a leg in 2020, then had complications with the surgery. Well, another bad crash in 2022 caused problems with his vision. Now, he was supposedly back at full fitness at the beginning of this season, but his riding this has been riddled with crash after crash. He had 5 at the Saxon Ring, where he actually pulled out of the event, and when he has finished, it's frequently been outside of the top 10. Now, he's currently in 15th place in the championship, and it is likely that Marquez is headed for the Gresini Racing Ducati team alongside his brother Alex. Now, whether switching to the Ducati will change his fortunes and help him add to his total of 59 wins in 163 starts is a matter for debate. Be interested to hear what other people have to say on that. I'm not a great follower of MotoGP these days, but yeah, if you've got any comments, let me know. Right, just a quick reminder, if you do enjoy the show, you can set your own alarm to remind you every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. Normally it goes out live on those dates, very occasionally recorded, and even more rarely I miss one or reschedule. But you can also then subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be nice if you can manage that. If you like the video, that would be great too, because that always helps people find it. And while you're on YouTube, do pop over, look at my other content over there. I've got the 60-second safety and the 60-second science series, both going strong. One's got over 100 videos in it, so again, lots of content over there to look at. So pop over to YouTube if you haven't done so already. Right, okay, so where are we now then? On to motorbikes, actually, yes. Not too much in the news this week, so straight over to the bikes. Now, I got it wrong. I'll admit that. I anticipated that the forthcoming Ninja Hybrid would be available next autumn, but I'm actually out by around 6 months. The groundbreaking machine will be available in the UK from April 2024. So, Suzuki Kawasaki actually released some pictures of the machine on Friday, so let's have a look at it in a bit more detail. There it is. There's no word on price yet, and with the new ZE1 electric bike being disappointingly expensive, I do suspect that this new bike, the Ninja 7 Hybrid, will almost certainly top 10k, probably by quite a margin. So, alright, what have we got then? Well, first of all, the bike actually gets a brand new 451cc 43.5 kilowatt, that's 58 horsepower parallel twin ICE motor. It's also destined, that particular engine, for the Eliminator 500 Cruiser, which will also join the Japanese firm's lineup next year. Now, it is based on the existing 399cc engine, which is found in the Ninja 400. 500, which is A2 compliant. You'll notice the 58 horsepower certainly takes this bike out of the A2 license class. But it adds an idling stop feature that kills the engine at a halt to save fuel and reduce emissions. The engine's fairly standard. It's double overhead cam, 8 valve water cooled unit, but it gets a combined manual auto gearbox with button shift sport riding option. You also get an automatic launch position finder, ALPF, which when selected automatically selects first gear at a standstill, plus you get a forward and reverse walk mode to aid low speed maneuvering and parking. To be honest, that sounds like a lot of electricity to go wrong. Now, the petrol engine alone would likely give the bike a similar performance to the old GPZ 500 bike I owned and quite enjoyed till it blew up. Top speed probably around 115 miles per hour, but of course the hybrid adds the electric traction motor. This adds a fairly modest 7.6 kilowatts of power, which is 10 horsepower, which used in e-boost mode gives you a total of 51.1 kilowatts or 68 horsepower. Now, this is said to rival conventional 650 to 700 cc machine in terms of overall performance, and it also gives the bike the instant acceleration which they say rivals that of a 1000 cc class super sport model when taking off from a standing start. I suppose we'll have to wait and see when the road tests start being done to see whether that's right or not, but even with the availability of this instant torque from zero revs from the motor, the electric motor, I really can't see the acceleration rivaling the big 1000cc bikes once they get moving. Anyway, the electric motor is just not powerful enough for that. But then again, how often do we accelerate hard on a modern motorcycle for more than a second or two? Because very quickly we're on the wrong side of license losing territory. Now, the other big claim for the machine is 250 class fuel economy. Now, it's stop-start traffic that often is an economy killer, either that or riding at very high speed. But whether the machine can sort of achieve these 75 mpg that I would hope for from a 250 in sustained highway riding will be interesting to see. There's a fairly slippery looking fairing, but the wind resistance is what matters at 60-70 miles per hour. But smaller motors, it has to be said, are usually more efficient cruising at those kind of speeds than bigger engines. So in mixed riding with the electric motor handling the initial getaway, I'm pretty happy that the bike will turn out to be more fuel efficient than machines like the MT-07 or even Kawasaki's own Ninja 650. Now, riders can switch between three riding modes. There's Sport Hybrid, there's Eco Hybrid, and there's EV. Each offer a distinct riding character, say Kawasaki. However, since petrol engine alone will be what determines top speed, I suspect if you're looking for economy and an MT-07 top speed, you'll be disappointed. Now, the other question is the EV range, of course. There's currently no hint of battery size. The bike is defined as a strong hybrid which combines an ICE with an electric motor and with the battery being capable of powering the bike on its own. But Kawasaki say in a footnote that, and I quote, the Ninja 7 Hybrid's EV mode may be helpful for certain situations where quiet riding is appropriate, such as in residential areas or in parking garages. Now, it also then says, quote, speed and range are limited. Now, it doesn't sound too hopeful. Whether it would make it the 30 miles from one side of London's ULEZ zone to the other, I do not know. But if it means driving up your own street and not waking the neighbours at 3 in the morning, then it's still perhaps a good thing. The full colour TFT instrumentation, you get this now normal smartphone connectivity via a custom Kawasaki app. Now, without offering any numbers, Kawasaki say that in terms of dimensions, the Ninja 7 Hybrid is a mid-sized package built around a specially designed version of the familiar trellis type chassis, which allows for an ergonomically relaxed riding position. Now, the video shows a cutaway. This is a snip from their YouTube launch video, and what you'll see is that the motor is placed pretty much where I expected it to be, behind the engine there, and the battery is under the seat. Okay, so all well and good. However, look at the wheelbase. The rear wheel is presumably a long way back to accommodate the battery under the seat, and I can't help but think that maybe a side-mounted shock on this bike would have been a better choice to accommodate the battery, which is hidden by those sort of 1980s style side panels. Now, here are two bikes. This is the Ninja 400 at the bottom and the new Ninja 7 at the top. Now, what I've done is I've carefully scaled them so that the front tyre, the front axle and the end of the can all line up, and what you should be able to see, I'll just move the photo slightly and zoom in, is that the rear wheel on the top bike is a considerable distance further back than the rear wheel on the bottom bike. So the I reckon that's around 5 inches longer, and that is actually quite an astonishing extra length of wheelbase. To give you a sort of a comparison, the Ninja 400 is 53.9 inches, the Ninja 650 is 55.7, the Z9 is 57.3 inches, but I reckon this is about 2 inches longer than even the Z9. So one thing I can say is I don't think you'll be pulling wheelies on this bike anytime soon. Now, Kawasaki say the bike is aimed at navigating both the urban jungle and countryside back roads. It's certainly not a rocket ship performance engine, and it's not a grand tourer either, but as an all-rounder it might tick a few boxes. I have to say I'd quite like something like that. It would do for me for most of what I do. The big challenge will be to communicate that to potential riders. I suspect a lot of riders will just look away instantly when they're not told it's not going to be a 1,000-mile-per-hour motorcycle. And the second problem will be keeping that price competitive. If they don't manage that, I can't see many riders taking a punt. Will Kawasaki manage this? We'll see in April. Right, okay, so what's the next topic of conversation? Well, it's from 2 wheels to 3. Now, back in December 2021, I talked about how Northamptonshire Police were the first in the country to take delivery of the WMC 300 FR First Responder 3-wheeler. So just a few days ago, Greater Manchester Police took delivery of a pair of these petrol hybrid 3-wheelers, and the important thing from their perspective is that they can be ridden on a car licence here in the UK. Manchester Police say they have trained 6 traffic PSCOs to ride the machines, and they're considering training up more officers in the future. Now, the bike is based on the Yamaha, I presume it's pronounced Tri-City rather than Tricity, Tri-City 300. It's powered by a single cylinder motor, the 292 28 horsepower. Let's just zoom in on that a little bit more so you can see them a little bit more clearly what they are. There they are. But what WMC have done is incorporated a hybrid electric motor. It's 5 kilowatts, 6.7 horsepower, and that provides a bit of a speed boost at low speeds, but it also handles takeoffs, I think. But the other big thing is a Venturi duct technology. Now, I'm not sure you can really see it very clearly in the photos, but if you look at the front of the machine there is actually a duct between the front wheels. And what this does is it flows the air through the sort of high pressure zone in the front of the bike, which will cause a lot of drag, and it just voids it out behind the bike. So it's a Venturi basically, and it reduces drag fairly significantly. So the technology combination of the reduced drag and the electric motor, they say it significantly reduces fuel consumption and emissions, of course. And the batteries are removable, so they can carry a spare on the bike, but they can also swap it over when they get back to the yard, and the bike can go straight back into operation without any charging downtime. And right now you have the opportunity to ride and own one of these machines, not obviously in the yellow and blue, but 10 of these bikes are being sold as convert or for the public. So they'll feature everything that you've seen here, plus spec'd up componentry. You'll get Olin's rear shocks, Akrapovic exhaust, environmentally friendly EBC green stuff brakes, Hell Performance braided lines, and K&N air filters. And you also get, wait for it, a recycled carbon Venturi duct. No word on price, and I suspect it's if you have to ask, you can't afford it. But anyway, now rather more affordable, hopefully, is in the I think it's also in the not before time category. A year after the launch of the V-Strom 800DE, a modified version has appeared, and it's soon to arrive in the catalogue. The bike is the V-Strom 800DE, and it's modified and road focused version of the parallel twin. Now, at the time of the launch, I did say that the bike was far too expensive, and judging by the number I've seen on the road, precisely one to date, it looks like Suzuki might have recognised that too. So what are the differences? Let's take a look at the photo from the launch. There you go. The first thing to point out is that the wheels, both are changed from the spoke rims that needed tubes to cast wheels which carry tubeless. Now, it's 4 decades since my CX500 arrived with tubeless rims and almost completely banished scary blowouts to the history books. So I still do not understand why manufacturers still build rims which cannot accept tubeless tyres. It is possible to build a tubeless rim on wire spoked wheels, but anyway, these are cast. They're down to a 19-inch diameter. That's supposedly to improve road handling. Front brakes get an upgrade to a more powerful 4-piston radially mounted pair of calipers. Suspensions lowered to reduce travel. The revised shower limits offer 150mm of travel at both ends, and the spring rate is said to be optimized for cornering performance and straight line stability. You get remote adjustment on preload on the rear shock, plus rebound damping back there too. The forks give you preload adjustment. The rider triangle does get a significant change though. The bars are lower, they're narrower, they're further forward, and the pegs are slightly higher and they're more rear set, so won't be quite as comfortable standing up on the pegs, but Suzuki claim that the mods will improve long distance touring comfort, and that's something that will also be helped by having a larger 3-position adjustable windscreen to provide more protection than the original bikes. Now, you still get the 20-litre fuel tank, you still get the bi-directional quick shifter, you still get LED lights, you still get the 5-colour TFT display, traction control, power modes, and you get that useful luggage rack as standard. But missing from this bike are sump and radiator guards, not exactly necessary on the roads for most people, but they have left off the hand guards, which is a slight disappointment, as I actually do often keep gloves quite dry with these and the sort of narrow screens. Weight's down 7 kilograms, but it's still a fairly porky 223 kilograms. I'll leave that to you to work out in pounds. Now, the biggest cut though of all is to the price, and that I think is good news, because it's down by a full £1,000 over the cost of the 800DE. £9,699, and so that makes Suzuki the second manufacturer this week, following Triumph, to offer a reduced price version of one of their bikes. In the US, there's also a V-Strom 800 Touring. It gets different colours, but you also get a lockable top box that uses the same key as the bike's ignition. It's actually $600 for that option. That's a lot for a top box. It's not clear if it's coming to the UK, but since the US version is a dollar equivalent price to the UK one in pounds, expect to pay £600 more if it does arrive here. And the bike should be in showrooms later this month. Right, now, okay, on to the final element of the show. Is where I do my sort of in-depth analysis of an issue, and this time it's the IAM Roadsmart response to the Welsh urban 20 limit. Now it's taken me a couple of hours to get couple of weeks to get around to this because I've had other things in the pipeline, but I'm finally going to take a look at the statement from the Director of Policy and Standards, Nicholas Lies, where he was critical of the introduction of this 20 urban limit in Wales, which you'll recall has been introduced on the basis that it will reduce the number of casualties on the road. So this is his tweet online. I'll just sort of basically read out the first line of it. What he said was he started with a claim that the road safety benefits of blanket 20 areas are not yet firmly established. Now that depends where you look for answers. As with many things like this, there will be research papers which support research papers which ask questions, and the study that a lot of people are referring to came from Queen's University Belfast and the University of Edinburgh. That was published last year in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, and what they did was they analysed data from before and after a 20 limit was introduced on 76 roads in the centre of Belfast in 2016. They compared crash and casualty rates with what they described as similar streets in the surrounding area and elsewhere in Northern Ireland that has actually retained a 30 or a 40 limit. Now this is the interesting bit. When you actually look at the numbers that they counted, they found that both road traffic collisions and casualties had fallen by 15 and 22% respectively over the 3-year study. But when they did statistical analysis on these figures, they said there was no statistically significant differences. Now what I'm guessing here is that this means that the absolute numbers were too small to be statistically valid. You'll recall, for example, I keep pointing out that police forces will say that casualties are up X number of percent when in fact the death rate has gone up 1. You know, it's just not statistically valid. So really the study needs to be longer. So what it means when you look at these papers is that it means that you can't draw conclusions from the study. What it doesn't mean is that 20s don't work, which is what a lot of people are interpreting this statement to mean. Now similarly, incidentally, the DFT found, quote, not enough evidence to conclude that there has been a significant change in collisions and casualties following the introduction of 20 mph limits in residential areas. But once again, this study only addressed 12 case study, so that it wasn't a broad reaching study of all the roads. Now, so the problem really here is it seems to be that the studies are too small to prove they do work, but it's not that they prove they don't work. So there is a huge difference between those two conclusions. So can we find a bigger sample size? And we can, and we have to travel to Spain. And when Spain reduced the limit on their urban roads from 50 kph to 30 in 2019. The result was, according to a Road Safety GB article at least, 20% fewer urban road deaths, with fatalities reduced by 34% for cyclists and 24% for pedestrians. So is the jury still out on 20 limits? Well, possibly, but the evidence is pointing in the direction of a reduction in casualties. Now, Lies continues, given the limited resources that road authorities and police forces have, we believe it will be better to have 20 limits on specific streets where there are schools, hospitals, and where risks to vulnerable road users are at their highest, along with traffic calming measures and effective enforcement. If this were the case, we suspect compliance would be far better than simply sticking up 20 mph signs and hoping for the best. Right, first things first here. Note the contradictory element in the statement. He talks about limited police resources, and then he asks for more enforcement. How's that going to work? The statement didn't go well on the platform formerly known as Twitter either. As one IAM member said, I'm disappointed by this tweet. You want 20-mile-per-hour limits past schools, but not on the roads kids must walk or cycle along to get there. I think the tweet is badly judged and you don't represent my views. Another said, I've been on the brink of doing some training. That's just decided now. I think this statement reveals you as anything but advanced. Do children just walk, cycle to school outside schools? Make of that what you will. But in some ways, the error in the thinking here is to assume that the goal of a 20 limit is no vehicle travelling at more than 20 miles per hour. For example, the Car Wow website says one of the biggest problems with 20 mile per hour limits is that almost nobody obeys them. Official government statistics show that in 2021, 87% of drivers broke 20 mile per hour speed limits. Compare that with 30 mile per hour limits, where 51% of drivers exceeded that limit, and it's clear that compliance in 20 limits is poor. So they're obviously implying here that 20 limits are a failure and they're not going to work. Well, that's the difference between compliance, the law, and what actually happens in real life. Now, the 20 limit may be a law, but the effect on speed isn't quite as simple as putting up the sign and expecting speeds to fall instantly to 20 or less. Now, the fact is, just because X number of vehicles don't comply with 20 limits doesn't mean that they're a failure. What actually happens is that the average speed of all vehicles drops. Absolute compliance may be lower because not all drivers drive at 20 or less, but most vehicles slow down. And I have a couple of interesting graphs that I want to show you. So let's just bring these up on stage. Let's go to the top one first of all and just zoom in on that, make that a little bit bigger so you can see what it's all about. Now, this is taken from the DFT's annual speed limit compliance report. They bring this out every year and they tell you how well people are doing at sticking to the speed limit. Now, as you can see in the top graph there, most drivers did in fact exceed the 20 limit, but the fact is that most drivers were still clustered below 30 miles per hour, and there were a few of course actually below the limit. So the majority of drivers' speeds were affected by the 20 limit. They did drop the average speed down. Now let's have a look at the bottom graphic. And if you remember the top one, what you'll actually see is that compliance has improved slightly. There are rather more drivers now on the correct side of the 20 symbol than there were in the previous one. Let's just go back and have a look at it again and you'll see the difference. It was under 10% were travelling under 20, and then smaller percentages travelling even slower. By 2022, you'll note that it gone up to about 15 here were at or about 20 miles an hour, and again you've got a tail of drivers who are travelling rather more slowly. So there has been an overall shift in compliance on these roads, but more importantly there has been an average speed drop on these roads. So I would say that this is evidence that there is a downward shift in speeds towards compliance. May not have reached it, but it's actually reducing speed. So from that point of view, I'd say that they work. Now, one other point, I would be very interested to know how much non-compliance is actually down to a failure to recognise that you're actually in a 20 limit. Now, last weekend I visited friends. I've been visiting for 30 years. I haven't moved, but the speed limit has changed. They're now in the middle of a new 20 mile per hour area. I turned into this zone and I simply did not see the sign at the end of the road. It was only when I spotted a repeater about a quarter of a mile away that I suddenly realised that the limit had changed. More on this next week, incidentally, when I come back to this topic. Now, I also think it's important to remind everyone that the reduction in the national speed limit across Wales, it's being talked about disingenuously in certain areas. as a blanket limit. The Welsh Conservatives, for example, called it a blanket 20-mile-per-hour speed limit across Wales. It isn't anything of the sort. It doesn't affect roads which already had a speed limit over 30 miles per hour. And more importantly, before the change, which came in last month, the situation was this: the default limit was 30, and councils had the power to designate specific roads as 20s. What's happened is that the reverse is now true. The default is 20, but exactly the same councils have exactly the same power to designate a road as a 30 limit if they feel that the higher limit is appropriate. So perhaps the challenge the IAM should be pursuing is to accept that default 20 as it is, but then to argue for higher speed limits on appropriate roads. Maybe push for something like improved segregation between cyclists and pedestrians, where faster roads can be safely engineered to keep cars and vulnerable road users apart. And since the IAM represent motorcyclists too, I would suggest that includes working on getting motorcycles into bus lanes. So there's some things I think the IAM should be working on. Right, that's enough on the topic for now. I will come back to 20s next week, when I'll put out my own logical arguments about how they're used and abused. So as always, comments, questions welcome. If you've got anything to say on this, I'd be more than happy to read it. If you want to find the government own statement on 20 limits, I can put you a link up here. Here it is, going up any moment. That will take you to the government's own 20 limit study. Right, anyway, that is it for today. So I just got one more thing to say, and that is to thank my supporters who have dropped me a line and bought some membership at as a subscriber or a supporter on my Ko-fi page. Sandy, Howard, Nick, Kelvin, Hallam, who bought a book, Kevin, Drew, who also bought a book, and Anonymous. Thank you very much indeed for your support. And if you are not yet a supporter, why not pop over to my Ko-fi page and take a look. There is plenty to read over there, plenty of free stuff, and then you can decide whether or not you fancy investing a tiny amount of money every month. It's far less than Motorcycle News would cost you, for example. And of course, if you do, you'll get your name up in lights here. So that's it for today. Thank you very much indeed for looking in again. Always good to see you here. Don't forget, if you've got anything to say on what we've covered today, the hybrid motorcycle, for example, or the 20 limit comments from the IAM, I'd be very, very happy to hear them. So that's it for today. If you are out there, as I said, it looks like a nice warm and sunny day, quite still as well. Do make sure that you stay shiny side up.